I closed my eyes. That was all I could do. My legs had stopped working somewhere between the second collapse and the third wall of fire. My hands were pressed flat against the cold metal floor. The air smelled like burnt wiring, and something sharper, something chemical, something that made my throat itch with every breath. I had run until I could not run anymore, and when I turned the corner of Corridor 7, he was already there. A human. He was crouched near the far wall, going through a bag with his hands. He had not heard me yet. I had exactly 3 seconds to turn around, but my legs refused, and then his head came up, and our eyes met, and that was the end of running. I dropped to my knees. I pressed my palms together, the way my nest mother had shown me when I was very small. I began the mantra, the old words, the ones Zyrathi say when there is nothing left to say. They are not a prayer exactly. They are more like a quiet agreement with the universe, an acceptance, a way of telling yourself that what is happening is already over, and the only thing left to do is not be afraid of it. I closed my eyes. I waited. Nothing happened. I waited longer. Still nothing. There was a soft sound, something sliding across the floor toward me. I opened one eye, just a little, the way you open a window when you are not sure if it is raining yet. It was a small rectangle, silver foil, still slightly warm. I stared at it. I did not touch it. My brain was working very hard to make sense of what I was seeing, because what I was seeing did not fit inside any category I had been taught. The human had moved back. He was sitting against the wall now, with his long legs stretched out in front of him, and he was looking at the ceiling, not at me, which was strange, because predators do not look away. "You look like you haven't eaten since the blast," he said. His voice was low and even. He spoke in Galactic Common, with a slight accent that curled the ends of his words. "That's a calorie brick. From my kit. It's not going to taste like anything good, but it'll keep your body running." I did not move. "You don't have to take it," he added. "I just thought you might want it. My name is Vessel Third of Athen. My people call me Vey. I am a cartographer's apprentice, which means I spend most of my time reading maps and drawing small, precise lines, and checking measurements 3 times before I believe them. I am not a soldier. I am not a diplomat. I have no training for this. But I had training for him. Every Zyrathi does. The Galactic Compendium on Human Contact fills 11 volumes. Volume 4 is the one they show children. It has a section called Known Predation Events, and it is long. The images are not shown to anyone under nest age, but the words are read aloud at school, the way you read a warning label on something that could burn you. I had heard those words so many times that I could recite whole paragraphs the way others recite songs. I knew what humans did when they were hungry. I knew what humans did when they were cornered. I knew what happened when a large, warm-blooded carnivore was sealed in a small space with something small and soft and warm. I knew all of this. And yet the calorie brick was still sitting on the floor between us, and the human was still looking at the ceiling, and my hands were still pressed together in the death acceptance position, and nothing was happening. His name was Rennick Oduya. I learned this because he introduced himself. He just said it, casually, the way you say something that is simply true. "I'm Rennick, by the way, Corporal, Search and Rescue, 3rd Station Unit." Then he paused and looked at me and said, "Do you want to tell me yours? Or would you rather just sit there with your hands like that for a while?" I told him my name. He tried to say it properly. He failed twice, then asked if Vey was acceptable. I said it was. He nodded, as though we had completed a piece of business together. Then he went back to going through his bag, and I sat on the floor and tried to understand what was happening to me. The station had been called Outpost Miravel 7. It was a mid-range logistics hub. Nothing important. Nothing worth fighting over. The reactor cascade had not been anyone's fault, as far as anyone knew. It had simply failed, the way old things sometimes fail. And now the outer sections were open to the atmosphere, and the inner sections were slowly filling with smoke, and the rescue teams were somewhere above us, and we were somewhere below, and between us was a great deal of broken metal. Rennick assessed the situation the way a person assesses a broken machine, calmly, piece by piece. He checked the air recycler in the corner. He tested the door seals. He counted the supplies in his bag, and then looked at me and said, "What do you have?" I had my data slate, my cartographer's tools, a small personal ration, and a blanket I had grabbed without thinking when the first alarm sounded. He looked at the ration. He looked at me. Zyrothi burn more calories per body weight than humans, he said. It was not a question. He had done this kind of calculation before. We split the food, but not evenly. You take more. I told him that was not necessary. He said, I know it's not necessary. I'm choosing to do it. I sat with that for a moment. Then I told him I knew what he was doing. He looked up from the bag. What am I doing? I said it as plainly as I could. I told him I had read the compendium. I told him I understood that increasing a prey animal's caloric intake before consumption was a documented strategy. I told him I was not going to be tricked by kindness. He stared at me for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, "Who told you that?" I said, "The compendium told me that." He said, "Can I see it?" I did not want to hand him my data slate. But he was already not eating me, which was confusing enough that I decided to extend the confusion a little further. I opened the compendium to volume 4 and held it out. He took it carefully, the way you take something from someone who is not sure they want to give it. He read for a while. His expression did not change much. His jaw got a little tighter in one place. Then he started reading aloud, not to perform anything, just quietly, like someone checking their work. And after each entry, he said something. He said things like, "This is about a feral Earth variant, not standard humans," and "That event involved a species misidentified for 3 centuries," and "This one," he paused, "this one is about a completely different planet. The coordinates are wrong. These are not humans." I said the compendium was compiled by 11 species over 400 years. He said, "I believe you. And most of those species were scared of something. Fear is very good at making things look like the same thing." He handed the data slate back. He did not seem angry. He seemed the way you seem when you find out that a story you have been telling is missing pages, and you realize you have been telling it wrong for a long time without knowing. "I'm not going to eat you, Vey," he said. "I want you to know that, not because I'm asking you to trust me, but because it's just true. It's not something I would do. It's not something most humans would do. And I'm sorry that somewhere along the way, someone turned us into the worst thing you could imagine, and then put it in a book, and called it a record." I did not know what to say, so I said nothing. But I picked up the calorie brick from the floor, and I opened it, and I ate it. It did not taste like anything good. He had been correct about that. The oxygen alarm went off 4 hours later. Rennick checked the recycler again, checked it twice, then sat down and was quiet, in a way that was different from his usual quiet. His usual quiet was comfortable. This quiet had weight in it. He did some calculations on his wrist unit, then he looked at me. He explained it without softening it. His body mass required more oxygen than mine. With one recycler failing, the air in the sealed corridor would last long enough for me to survive until the rescue teams reached our level, which his unit's beacon put at approximately 7 hours. But only if his body was not also consuming air in the same space. He said there was a secondary compartment. Small, sealed. He could move there. He said it the way you say something you have already decided. He said it like math. And then he stood up and picked up his bag and started walking toward the compartment door. I do not know why I grabbed his sleeve. I had not planned to. My hand simply moved. The way your hand moves when something falls and you try to catch it before your mind has finished deciding whether it is worth catching. He stopped. I said, "That calculation does not account for your survival." He looked at me. He said, "Yeah, that's the point." I held onto his sleeve. My hands are small. Everything about me is small, but I did not let go. I told him to sit down. He sat down, not because I made him, I think, but because he was curious. Rennick was very curious about things. It was something I had noticed. I opened my cartographer's tools. I opened the station schematics on my data slate. I told him I had been memorizing this station's layout since we arrived 3 weeks ago, because that is what cartographers do. We do not just read maps. We hold them inside us. We notice the places where the lines don't match the walls, and we remember them. There was an airflow junction in Corridor 9. It was not on any rescue team's list, because it had been built as a secondary system, and then forgotten when the station was expanded. But it was there. I had noted it on my 3rd day. I had not known then that I would ever need it to mean something. Rennick looked at the schematic. He looked at me. He said, "You knew this was here?" I said yes. He said, "Can we reach it from here?" I said yes. But the access panel was in the ceiling, and the ceiling was high, and my arms were not long enough. He stood up. "Tell me where to go." So I read the map, and he moved through the space, and I told him left and right and up, and slightly back and now stop, and his arms were long enough, and his hands were strong enough, and 40 minutes later, the second recycler came online, with a sound like an old thing waking up from a very long sleep. The air in the corridor changed, just a little, just enough. We sat down on the floor together, not far apart, and neither of us said anything for a while. Then he said, "Good catch." I said, "You would have died." He said, "Probably." I said, "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because you were scared, and you were alone, and that didn't seem right to me. I don't know how to explain it better than that." I thought about Volume 4 of the compendium. I thought about the 11 species who compiled it. I thought about 400 years of fear written down in careful words and called a record. I thought about my nest mother's voice reading those words to me when I was very small, and how I had believed all of it, every single word, because it was in a book, and books are where the truth lives. The rescue team came through 6 hours and 40 minutes later. There were 4 of them, 1 human, 1 Chorathi, 2 Mirathi in full suits. They stopped in the doorway the way you stop when the thing in front of you doesn't make sense yet. Rennick's jacket was around my shoulders. I had been cold, and he had noticed, and he had put it there without making a significant event of it. The Chorathi medic said something to the Mirathi beside her in a low voice. "I have good hearing," she said. "Is that a Zyrathi? With a human? Both alive?" Rennick waved. Just a simple wave, like a person who is sitting in a corridor, and other people have arrived. I did not wave, but I did not close my eyes. I have told this story to other Zyrathi many times now. Some of them believe me. Some of them say I am describing something that does not happen. They point to the compendium. They point to Volume 4, the entries, the records, the 400 years of careful fear. I point to the calorie brick he put on the floor and moved away from. I point to the jacket. I point to a man standing up and walking toward a small compartment to die quietly, because it was the math that made sense to him, and then sitting back down because I asked him to. The compendium has 11 volumes. I am writing a 12th. It will only have 1 entry, but I think it is the most important one. He called it a Tuesday,